Hey there, all. Well, still can't sleep, so figured I'd get to this vid. Chicagoland in the Xfinity series. Now, Chicagoland is a track that I didn't have until the Nascar 213 sim game, and I liked it first time I saw it on television. I said, you know, that's probably a fun track. Reminded me a lot of Atlanta. And it's fast, it's wide, it's multi-groove. It's just, building this track was like exactly tailor-made for NASCAR racing. And that's cool. Chicagoland is one of the first mile and a halves I figured out in the old NASCAR series 2013, 14, 15. And it helped me figure out all the rest of the mile and a halves. NASCAR 3, I had an ace setup in this thing. I could lap the whole field if I wanted during the course of a full-length race, especially if there was a nice long run. And I get to NASCAR Heat 4, and it's one of those tracks that I can't quite figure out how to get a really fast setup that lasts a whole gas run. 30, 40 laps, 50 laps, whatever it is. And, I can get it, to run for 10, 15, sometimes 20 laps or more, but I just can't get it to go. And on the mile and a half, it's like 5 to 10 laps. And then all the speed goes away, usually dies in the corners. I'm 10 miles an hour slower than when I was on fresh tires 10 laps before, and everybody goes past me. So working real hard to try and figure out all the little levers you can push, and get good handling, increase your tire wear, and keep the speed. Atlanta's the first track I really figured out, mile and a half I figured out here, in NASCAR Heat 4. Chicagoland I worked very hard on, and I actually got red 4424's Chicagoland setup, and I was working on it for Cup. I think for Cup. And I was like, okay, I'm like, I like things a certain way. I like the car to do certain things. Like, I like it to turn in. And, specific things, and I know certain things that you can do, and sometimes they help, and sometimes they don't help as much and have to do other things. But I've been doing it for so long, I kind of like, I can go into a setup and without even driving it and just change some stuff and like, okay, let's see what this does. So I'm very particular. Chicagoland is a little bit weird. It's very fast, and usually when you get a very, very fast speedway, you want a decent amount of front weight. But sometimes it doesn't help you, especially when you're going really fast through the turns and you don't have 30-degree banking like at Daytona or Talladega. I believe Chicagoland is 24 degrees, which is what a lot of the mile and a halves are, at least in part. Like Texas lowered their 24 degrees to 20 in turns 1 and 2, and they left turns 3 and 4 24 degrees. So but you still got 24 degrees on one end of the track. And I guess there's an attempt to make it more unique, like a Darlington, where you have two different ends of the track, two totally different radius turns, two different types of banking. They didn't build Darlington with like banking in mind. It's just like, okay, let's dig up some dirt and put some banking on it. Let's see how much we got here. Oh, we can't hurt the fishing pond, so we'll just make this end of the track tighter and shorter than the other end. And that's how Darlington got built the way it did. Later tracks like Chicagoland, you know, they engineered it with usually with driver input. Like I know Darrell Waltrip had a lot of input into Kentucky, and that's what, you know, he contributed to a lot of Kentucky's uniqueness. Whereas Chicagoland, it's big, it's smooth, it's kind of like a smaller Daytona in a lot of ways, but you can't really hold it wide open. I mean, you can for a couple laps if you got a really good setup, but it's not always the fastest way around, you know, breathing it at the apex, or, you know, where you have to, and letting it roll through the center usually helps. Depending. Yeah, shot through the lead there. See, that's the fast, you know, right after a pit stop, you know, just like you can bonsai through. I also wanted to address my coming up to the field. You know, I have this is a career and it's set on Legend AI, so they're the fastest you can get them. I do have wide restarts because they tend to be more realistic, though I'd like a feature on restarts for the start of the race and for restarts, say, within a certain percentage of laps to go. Not quite 10, because sometimes it's 20 laps to go or 30 laps to go, and that's that critical, what everybody feels is going to be the last restart that nobody gives an inch on, to have a more compressed restart under those situations and conditions, or like 10 laps, not 10 laps, 20 laps before a stage if you race stages like I do, just to make it, you know, a little bit more realistic. But coming up through the field, I've been sim racing for a very long time. And used to have Papyrus's NASCAR Racing Series, which really got me hooked, where you could have all the settings and such, and a little different than what we have here in NASCAR Heat 4, but, you know, basically the product is very, very similar. You could definitely see the, you know, where things came from. In fact, some of these tracks, graphically, the older tracks, were scanned, and those have kind of like migrated down from company to company. I know some of them have, like Talladega. Talladega is one of those tracks that like was like originally graphically rendered like, you know, 30 years ago, and it kind of like they redid it in the late 90s, and that's like the underlying basis for a lot of stuff. I know they re-laser scanned it, and, you know, sometimes every year, I know iRacing tries to do that, and such, to get all the little nuances and the bumps in it. But, you know, a track like Talladega is, you know, it's kind of unique. I think the current version goes back to like NASCAR Racing 3 or 4 or something like that. But anyway, I used to come home after work, and I used to set up a 40-car field, and later a 20-car field, and I used to start at the back in a 10-lap shootout, and get through the field, and I used to win almost every time. Not in the beginning, but, you know, later on, once I got the setup right and so on and so forth. You know, physics weren't anywhere near as complex as you have in NASCAR Heat 4 and other newer sims. Just like from Electronic Arts until NASCAR, the inside line is like a quantum leap. You might not feel it because they didn't translate it so well, but that data went into making it. But in Heat 4, even in Heat 3, you could definitely feel that, and in the NASCAR series too, that they definitely got the body roll, you know, in there. They got, you know, a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyway, I used to race that stuff in NASCAR racing too, and I used to do that all the time. You know, what's the best way to get through? And I realized that the best line you can take getting up through the field is a line where you never have to lift. You know, and that was at a restrictor plate track. And they didn't encrypt the internal settings back then. You could mod a whole bunch of stuff. So I So I went in there and I would bump it up from 100, I think it was 101 it came with. I'd bump it up to 107. I tried 110 because it still wasn't fast enough for my setups eventually. But at 110, what happened was the top speeds would increase and be more competitive. But the restart speeds, I mean, literally they'd all take off and I'd be, a quarter lap behind them because they'd like instantly go to full speed, and I still had to work up through the gears and so on and so forth. So that was a big failing in the engine physics and acceleration physics, back then. But I got 107 because it was like at Daytona and Talladega, even if I fell behind at the end, I could still keep the draft and be able to catch the pack and work my way through it. But it was tricky. It had to be like almost perfect. So I've been doing that, like every day. I don't know how long? 6 years, 7 years, something like that. Like 8 years. Every day I come home and do that. And that's me. So if I know I'm pitting and no one else has pit yet, and I'm going to have 20 lap fresher tires, I know I'm going to be that much faster than the field, which will aid me in my working my way up through like you just saw me do. And you can do that, I mean, when I work on setups now now that I'm on PS4, I use quick racing. I use like I forget what it is. It turns out usually it's about 13 to 19 laps or something. So I'll set the setup up, and when I get to a certain point, I was like, okay, let's see how it is in traffic, because the tracks race differently than they practice. Just trust me on this. I typically put about 50 laps of practice into almost every race. And then, you especially when you're working on setups and trying to, maximize everything I talked about, you get into a race, and then all of a sudden that problem that you adjusted out is there on the first lap, and you're like, what the and then you realize because during the race is differently. Not only the aero effect from the cars around you, which will cause your car to do weird things, just like on TV. Watch the races on TV, and they'll tell you, you get inside a car or truck, into the turn. You're on the inside, they're in the middle, and you'll get loose, and you will. If there's a car behind you and a car outside of you, you'll get loose, you'll get squirrely, you lose grip front or rear depending on your setup. Especially on older tires, it's even more pronounced. There is all that, and it's hard to deny it because I've experienced it. I can't say I've experienced all that in real life, but a fair amount. But in sim racing, you get under a guy and you're loose, and then you get looser. It's hard to avoid. I remember in NASCAR 15 when I was working on my Texas setup, I get into the race, and on the start, I'm on the inside on the start, and I'm coming out of turn 2, and the rear end just picks up, and I get loose and spin out. And I'm like, wow, you can't detect something like that in practice. And what I ended up doing is I ended up bumping the rear ride height up to get the spoiler up in the air, just a fraction of an inch, quarter of an inch, half inch, whatever it was, just enough not to slow me down so much, but to put a little more downforce on the rear end. So when I got in that situation, I wouldn't spin out, at least on fresh tires, kind of thing. So there's little things you can do, little tricks. Like I haven't gotten there here because I'm still working on the setup. And I was lucky to get the win. Good to be lucky. So I didn't get the stage win. I was struggling if I don't get all the stage wins. Or just one of them. Sometimes I'll just sacrifice a stage win to make an adjustment, knowing that I won't have time to get back up there. But I'm now one adjustment ahead of where I want to be. Because I might, loose, tight, air pressure, wedge. You don't have a lot of range. sometimes you get to get creative. Oop. Did I do that? I didn't mean to do that. I don't wreck anybody intentionally. You know, it's sometimes easy to get, you know, annoyed at a lap car. I know I was. What was I doing? Oh, I was racing Kansas in my ×2 championship single season 50% length, and I was struggling with the car because I picked the wrong setup. Fortunately, I don't have a video from that because I was on PS4 and figured out how to quite do that yet. So I'm doing it for you know, working on the setups because they're different in quick race. Anyway, so I'm doing that, and I got Kyle Larson running the high line, which I found my car was good at, but I can't pull down if you're in the high line because the car was that loose, you know, in the turns. So I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to get by Larson, and I'm like, okay, so I'll go high and then I'll cut low. You know, I'll cut across the exit, you know, when I have fresh enough tires before they get too bad. And sure enough, here comes Chase Elliott on the inside. So he's running the low line. And I can't, and the way he's running low is I can go shoot the middle, but I got to maintain my line. I can't cut it down and cut the corner and gain some time on Larson in that particular situation. So I was just like, I should just wreck him. but I didn't, you know, because that's not right, you know, kind of thing. But you want to. It's like, get out of my way, you know. And I used up a bunch of tire in that particular thing, and ended up pitting late, and ended up with just the top 10. But you know, it's a top 10. You know, I'm thinking in this series so far, I got like 8 races in. I think I won 5 or 6 of them, and I haven't finished lower than 10th. So I think that's a pretty successful season so far. So it's all relative, you know. And then like in my last video, I was at Iowa, and you know, I took that setup and translated to Cup in quick race, and I took it, and it was a race online, and I was like, okay, I'll do it with the custom setup. And I was like, and I won it by a lot, and I was like, wow. So even though it was only like a top 10 car in career against AI, it was pretty sporty online. So you know, you never know, and especially in short races. You know, I knew it was good up to like, you know, 18, 19, 20 laps or something. So just go for it, have fun. Yep, I'm working my way up. Lap 183. And this is the last run. Let's see, coming up, just put the car where you know you can run, and the other guys are not going to let you in there. You know, I learned that from Dale Earnhardt because somebody asked him a long time ago, before I was really into racing, and he said, you know, how do you win, you know, so much? Because they were winning 4 and 5 races at a time in the 80s, and when he got with Childress, and he's like, you know, sometimes it's how you work traffic. And I've also heard other drivers say it's how he worked the traffic. He would slow down at one point of the track, so he would pass a guy at a particular point because he knew he wouldn't lose any speed, and he knew slowing down where he did, he would lose less on the lap. That's how he was, you know. And some guys are like that, you know, calculating. I mean, that's not his reputation, but you know, he did that all, you know, himself, and it's tough, you know. I mean, I think the biggest thing I ever heard of him on the radio was, you know, basically saying, you know, be quiet, leave me alone, don't talk to me, when he was trying to win a race or do something difficult that he had to do, you know, kind of get past the guy or whatever. So, yeah, and everybody's different, you know. Some guys like input, some guys don't. You know, me, just give me the lap times and let me think. Just give me the lap times. Give me my lap times, give me the intervals. Some more information than you get on here would be good. But that's also why I keep my temp screens open. When I'm working on setups in particular during a race, I want to see what it's doing. Plus, if I wreck, then I don't get as much information. So if I'm getting too tight or getting too loose, I see the temps go up, so I can adjust my line. And also make a note, okay, 10 laps in, it gets loose. 20 laps in, it gets stupid tight, you know, or I start to lose grip and I'm sliding up in the second groove, so I gotta figure out, you know, if I want to slow down, or if, you know, if there's cars, or if I gotta, or if I can just slide it up, let it slide, you know, and just hang it out and, you know, go for the speed and hope for the best, you know. Anyway, thank you all for coming along for another ride, and you all keep rolling.